Good afternoon and welcome along to a Celtic State of Mind here on a Monday lunchtime. I'm joined by Mr. Double Denim, Chris McElwain. Chris, how are you today?
I'm well. Just an apology to everybody. You've probably seen too much of me over the last few Acsom episodes, but it is just purely because we're letting the boss have a bit of time off. Hopefully, normal service will be resumed towards the end of this week. But yeah, it's but otherwise doing good. I'm feeling a little bit sore. Feeling every inch my 44 years. I tried to build a trampoline. I emphasise the word try to build a trampoline for my son's birthday at the weekends under the promise from my wife that it's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. So unpacked everything in the garden. As soon as I got it unpacked, what happened? It started raining. So absolutely soaked through. I'm sore. My hamstring's gone because I'm crawling under the thing trying to secure it. And yeah, so I'm feeling a little bit tender. Hence why I'm in slightly more comfortable surroundings than usual today. So.
Well, it's one of those ones. It's a Monday. You've got to go over the enjoyment of the weekend, back to the grind, and as you say, our boss, the man in charge, is on holiday at the moment. You may have noticed that if you watched any of the halftime or post-match analysis. And we are going to start there. We're going to start with the game on Friday. As I said, you covered it with Costa del Pol on Friday night. What was your overall thoughts, Chris, on the game? A 1-0 victory, but it was just one of those kind of wasting time moments for a lot of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, obviously you have time to reflect, over the weekend. When I watched it, I have to say I didn't come away with too many positives from it. Well, keeping in context that it is obviously the first pre-season game and, very much an opportunity for some of the young players to come out. But it's that opportunity element that kind of bothered me a little bit after the match. I felt that there wasn't enough, whether it's by virtue of the system or the way we played, or just the fact that maybe the conditions. But I don't feel as though enough players took the opportunity to go and stand out and showcase their skills. And I think that was my only real disappointment. There were times where I was looking for a little bit more impetus. I was looking for a bit more invention. And I know these are very much players on the fringes. They are young players. Young boy Daly coming on, only 16, fantastic moment for him. And actually, that one of the positive elements, seeing him coming on and certainly not looking over odds by being amongst some of the senior players. But a lot of the frustration that we as supporters felt with the style of football towards the end of last season was incredibly evident in that pre-season game. The sideways passing, sometimes players looking for the easiest option. If a teammate's in their direct line of sight, that's the pass they go for. And when I'm looking at young players, particularly young forward-thinking players, creative players or attacking players, I want to see a little bit more bravery on the ball. And I mean that with the greatest respect, right? It's very easy for, broken old me to sit here and say that. But when you get the ball, don't just immediately look to release it to the easy option. Take a bit of ownership. Turn it round, go and run. This is your opportunity in front of the manager to show what you can do. So I felt a little bit disappointed with that element in the match. With that said, good to see Johnny Kenny get on the score sheet. There were a couple of decent performances. I thought Ben Summers looked pretty good. I thought Kyle Ure in the middle of the park found space well and used it quite effectively. I don't know
about you, Chris, but Kyle Ure, I literally thought Callum McGregor was still in the park at times. he is the carbon copy double, and I know it's been said for a long time that Kyle Ure is the next Callum McGregor. That's the way that he's sort of been hyped up, and he's had the Academy Player of the Year as well. And he's someone that's not really been on the fringes of the first team, but watching that performance on Friday night, at times you had to remember it was Kyle Ure that was playing and not Callum McGregor.
Quite a mature performance in the way he used the ball, the way he used space, and I think for the position he was playing at that point, in a kind of deeper central role, that kind of worked, so while I'm criticising some of the players for, not maybe showing more attacking impetus, I thought his game management was pretty good. But as I say, Ben Summers I thought was pretty good as well. I thought Jude Bonner, was making good attempts to make something happen. Crossing wasn't quite always coming off, but actually, he showed a willingness to go and try and beat a man, and that's what I wanted. I think it's, look, I'm probably being overly harsh, right? And I can accept that, and I'm sure a few people will think that as well. But I just think if it was me and this was my opportunity, first team appearance, okay, it is a pre-season friendly, but go in front of the manager, go and show what you can do. And I didn't feel as though enough of the players took that opportunity. But as I say, perfectly happy to be called, harsh for saying that.
It's always hard, I guess, when it's your first 90 minutes of the season, getting into it. And as you say, that whole second half was really the Celtic B team, and Celtic TV were very sort of remindful of that throughout the game. They were always saying it's the B team, it's the B team, it's the B team. But there was players I did think that sort of stepped up, even in that second half. Obviously, as we mentioned, Kyle Ewer. I thought Thomas Hatton did very well on the right-hand side when he came on. He's someone who came back from quite a serious injury. And as you say, Connor Daly coming on at left back. He'd only just signed his first professional contract a number of days before. So at 16 coming on and making his debut, it was good to see. It was also quite interesting to see with that signing of Connor Daly, like the contract extension, Karamoko Dembele's younger brother, is another one that got one of those contracts as well. So it'll be interesting to see.
Oh yeah, there's about 7 players, wasn't there? 7 players.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's as much hype for him as what there was for his older brother. But as you say, not convincing as such, but a comfortable victory in the end. Neither goalkeeper was really tested, whether that be Josh Clark or Ross Doohan. Someone I thought I was kind of keeping an eye on that whole game was Austin Trusty in the first half. He was sort of written off towards the end of last season. It's obviously a big pre-season he's had. He's had the full pre-season. He's not been away with America. You're looking for someone who can sort of have the same impact as what Matt O'Reilly had after his first pre-season with Rodgers, and seeing what he can do and if he can improve. And I did think that his passing was better. He looked stronger. I know he's coming up against championship opposition, so it'll be interesting to see if he can bring that forward as we move through the season. But I'm hoping he's one that can make an upgrade on his performances from last year, Chris. And it's quite telling because Rodgers in the post-match press conference mentioned that he's looking to get one more defender in. That the signing of Inamura that took place obviously just before the game on Friday, he's more of, as he said, an investment of the club. He looks to be basically coming in and then potentially going back out on loan. He highlighted Dane Murray as the sort of backup to those two as well, to Scales and Trusty, which to me suggests that Stephen Welsh's career at Celtic is also finished. But Trusty, he's one that I'd say if I was to pick a team based on the players that we've got just now, it would be Carter Vickers and Trusty. And I want to see more out of him this season. We've obviously paid £6 million for him. It is time that he shows he's a £6 million player.
I completely agree. I think that there's an element of, when you look at the price tag, the amount of money we spent for Austin Trusty, he wasn't signed as a backup. He was not signed to play second fiddle to Liam Scales or any other, left-sided partner for Carter Vickers. He was, I think, signed with the express intention of playing alongside Carter Vickers. That for me was the intent behind Austin Trusty coming in. I think at times last season he did pretty well in that role. I think, like every player, they go through, rough patches in terms of their form. For a defender, that can quite often lead to goals conceded. So it's a difficult position. But I do think that the intention always was for Trusty to be that partner for CCV. Pleased to hear Rodgers talking up Dane Murray. Dane Murray seems to be a player that we keep hearing is on the fringes of making that breakthrough. And through a combination of really unfortunate circumstances, injury, fantastic for the boy to come back to that. But he's not quite, made that step yet. So if this again is that point where the manager's saying, okay, son, it's your time to go in there. And he can maybe be a capable deputy to Carter Vickers, Austin Trusty, and, if Liam Scales is still in the mix there as well, then that's great because we want that step up from youth. We want that connective tissue between the youth products and homegrown players coming through to augment the first team. So yeah, really pleased for Dane Murray. I agree with your point on Austin Trusty. I think there's a lot for Austin Trusty to prove to supporters in particular because, again, like Liam Scales, like quite a few other players in the current squad, he's divisive. He's divisive
Yeah.
in terms of form, his capability, whether or not people want him to be the cemented left-sided centre-back. But there's one big advantage. Carter Vickers, we expect, hopefully, will be fit for the new season. And we've got Kieran Tierney coming in. So that's great experience either side of him. And having a pre-season alongside these guys can only benefit him for the season ahead.
Absolutely. And following on from that, there's obviously been the news that broke over the weekend as well that Celtic are showing an interest in Dutch defender Justin De Haas. The 25-year-old left-sided centre-back currently plays for Famalicão in the Portuguese Premier League. They finished 7th last season, conceding only 39 goals. They had a positive goal difference. That's something I think's a bonus. He was linked in 2019 when he was still coming through at AZ with a move to Chelsea. He turned that down and went to PSV instead. Last season, 30 appearances for 2 goals, and his contract expires next summer. 6'4", commanding centre half. As someone says in the scouting report, he uses his height to dominate in the air. That is all you can ask for a Celtic defender in Scotland.
It's something we need, to be fair. I mean, Carter Vickers is a really good defender. I think his best asset is his positional sense. I think he reads the game well, and I think he positions himself well, and uses his physicality, in terms of keeping people off the ball, shielding the ball, that type of thing. But what we don't have is someone who's really dominant in the air at the back. That's something we've been missing. We've talked about, how that was often a flaw of Greg Taylor at left back as well, not being able to, stop the crosses coming in. But if the cross does come in, you need someone in there that is commanding, in the air. They need other characteristics and attributes as well, right? You need them to, have a bit of, good game intelligence, defender. So you want someone that can command both the ball on the ground and the ball in the air. But yeah, I certainly would welcome a player who has that height, that physicality, and actually is very, very good in the air. Because another area that we've really been lacking is scoring goals from set pieces, corners, free kicks, and if you've got a big player like that in the box offensively, then that's, takes a bit of pressure off players like Ida and gives, opposition defenders a real problem as well. So, yeah, I don't know enough about the boy. I think I've heard some people saying, maybe not the quickest, etc. But then, if he's not the quickest, you're looking for guys like KT to help cover that pace.
Yep.
Carter Vickers, as I say, is very, very good, I think, at reading the game and sometimes, sweeping up after, our less pacey defenders. So it could be a very shrewd signing, but I would certainly, whether it's this boy or another player, I like the idea we're looking at big, tall, strong players.
Yeah, and I see a couple of people in the comments saying that he needs to be a technically gifted player as well. From what I've seen from the scout report, he does look technically gifted. When he was at PSV and at AZ coming through, he was the free kick taker for them. That shows you how technically gifted he is as a player. He's someone who has averages something along the lines of like 5 long passes a game. So he's someone that can ping a ball, technically very good. I think he'll be comfortable here. There's one thing that we always say about the defenders in Scotland when we come up against the Tete Yengies of the world, when it's big brutes that, and you see it now, every team sort of in the bottom half of Scottish football is signing guys like this. I think, was it Kilmarnock the other day, signed a guy that had scored 1 or 2 goals in 30-odd games in the lower leagues last year, but was 6'4" and built like nothing else. So this is the kind of players that our defenders are coming up against, and it's ones in the past, Chris, that we've had the struggles with. So if we're looking at a physically assertive type of player, I think that's ideal to go alongside someone like Carter Vickers, who is comfortable with the ball at his feet.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think that when you're building up a partnership, I think at the back, you don't want 2 players who are like for like. You want different characteristics in a sense. If you've got someone who's maybe not as physically dominant, but as as you say, more technically proficient, then bring the physicality in. Bring the physicality in to play alongside them, and it gives you the chance to mix it up. I'm trying to remember who it was. It said, was it Jockstein that said it? Can't remember if it was Jockstein, but somebody will keep me right in the comments. But I remember certainly an alumni of Celtic said, what you need is chaos. You need someone that can create a bit of chaos during the match. And I think, you want opposition managers and opposition coaches and opposition players to have to think about, how are we going to deal with that problem versus how we're going to deal with that problem, But
Yep.
if, you've got two defenders that are exactly the same, it's much easier to scout them and have your team prepped to play against them. But now you've got to think about not only, bit of pace and bit of game awareness, but now you might have to think about the physical element as well. Actually, are our forwards going to bounce off this guy when he stands up to a challenge? So I do like the idea of, just bringing that element to our team, because I don't think we have enough of it.
And what was quite interesting is looking at his reports from last season. Ballamacao were playing 3 at the back. And we've spoke about this with the introduction of Kieran Tierney coming in. If we were to sign another left back, he's an option to slot in there at centre back as well. It gives us an option to go potentially 5 at the back if we're playing in a tough away European game, or if we're going to 3 and have a more attacking output. So to me, I think it's a sort of structured signing here that ticks a lot of boxes to play in Scottish football. And Rodgers is obviously touching on the fact that he still sees a future for Trustee, still sees a future for Scales. He sees Dane Murray as the guy that can come in. So I don't know about you, Chris, but to me it does suggest that we might have a few more options in terms of our tactical output next season.
Which would be nice, because again, go back to my earlier comments, and we've watched the pre-season game there. We are getting frustrated with the very rigid, inflexible tactical system, and it's largely attributed to the manager, right? He likes, he's defended the kind of horseshoe type approach to attacking. He said it's to try and find that point of attack. It can be turgid to watch. It can be quite tough to watch as a supporter. Especially when you come off the back of the free-flowing football that came under Ange Postecoglou. Now it's effective, and I think we saw that in Europe. Brendan is a very, I think we have to praise what he achieves in terms of his tactics. I thought he adapted to Europe very well last season, but towards the end of the season, it was starting to become a tough watch. It felt like teams had figured out how to play against us, and a lot of us were crying out for, the tactics don't need major surgery. Just tweak them. Tweak them. Keep opposition coaches guessing. And again, I appreciate I'm sounding like the armchair manager here. But when you're watching it, you're giving it the eye test as a supporter, which we all do, right? Let's be honest. And you're just saying side, and and you're looking at the teams we're playing, particularly domestically. And they don't look as though they were putting them under enough pressure. They don't look, not working them hard enough. And you're almost crying out for someone, just go direct, do something different, do something that we didn't see for the past 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 games. So, but you're right, you need the personnel to do that. So when you're looking at a recruitment, you're thinking, does that mean we might be seeing a little bit of a tactical switch? We've talked about Benjamin Nygren coming in and number 10. Does that mean we're going to play with a natural number 10 sitting behind a front man or 2 front men?
Yeah.
Are we going to partner Maeda with someone? Or, so I would like to see personnel brought in and also a little bit more, tactical fluidity in terms of the system. Not to the detriment of getting the results that we've been getting, because ultimately we've had 2 really successful seasons under Brendan following his earlier really successful stint. So I think it's important that you don't reinvent the wheel. But from a pure supporter's point of view, I'd like to see us just, particularly in domestic games where we're dominating, mix it up a little bit.
That's the thing, and we'll touch on this when we look at the forward options that have been linked in the last 24 hours or so. But just having that different dynamic to the side and having the different options that they can go through, I think can only benefit us, Chris. One of the things that I remember hearing last season when I was listening to Open Goal, and they were talking to Andy Halliday, and I know Andy Halliday's a bit of a divisive figure, but I think he talks fairly well about Celtic, and he's actually very tactically astute. What he was saying is, you do know how Celtic's going to play. You see that they're going from side to side, the way they're going forward, etc. But you can know about how much they play all you want. It's stopping that. Yes. And in Scotland, a lot of teams do struggle with stopping the way that Celtic play. And you'll get it the odd time. I remember going to St Johnstone last season and watching the game up in Perth, and you could tell in the first half that St Johnstone had us had us written out. They knew exactly how to play against us, and it was a very difficult game to watch. And as we were speaking about on Friday, Nicholas Kuhn came off at half-time alongside Jeffrey Sloop at half-time, and we changed it up, and it looked a bit more exciting, and we just couldn't create that big chance. I think James Forrest had the best one of the game that went straight into the keeper's hands.
That's right.
And that's what it is. It's you can tweak parts of what is a very good plan just to make it slightly better. And when we look at the forwards that's been linked, I think that is something we'll see this season. I'm not sure that we will have an out-and-out number 9, someone that's going to lead the line for the club this season. I know obviously you've got Adam Ida that can do that. Dyson Maeda had been doing it, but he is obviously naturally drifting out wide as where he's normally been playing. Kyogo, when he was here last season, was someone that was dropping into a sort of false 9 position to pick the ball up. He wasn't someone that was sort of in and around the box to tap it in. And you've got players like that, like Ida, like Kenny, as Kenny showed on Friday night, he can do that. But the first one that I'm going to look at is Giuseppe Ambrosino, who's been linked with a loan with option to buy move, 21-year-old from Napoli. I think, Chris, we've had someone scouting the 21 Euros because that's 2 players now from that has been linked with in the last few days, Tyler Morton and now Giuseppe Ambrosino. He scored 5 goals in 36 last year in Serie B, which probably doesn't jump out as someone that we're looking to have lead the line and score all the goals. But when you look at what he's doing, he's playing across the front 3, he's playing left, he's playing right, he's playing through the middle, he's playing that false 9, and technically he looks very good. I went and watched the clip of the under-21s. I think he was playing Germany in either the semi-final or the final. Scored a fantastic free kick, very technically gifted. And he also sort of helped with Italy being down to 9 men at that point, keep them in the game, keep them going, giving them an out ball. He is someone to me, just from the sort of small clips that we've seen, and I know YouTube can make a video look great, but he does look as if he's someone who has a bright future ahead of him. Sky Italia reporting that he's keen on the move to Scotland. This could be another one of these ones where we get him in, and then we need to make sure that the option to buy is actually the fee, and not one that when we get to this time next summer we're going, right, we need to negotiate this fee again.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're you're a young player at Napoli, you've clearly got ability, right? I don't think Napoli, take too many duffers there. So, he's 21. He's not really made the breakthrough in playing in Serie A yet, but he has played in Serie B, which is not that it's not a huge drop off. Obviously, the under-21 championship, he's acquitted himself well. You might be absolutely right in terms of the scouting there, because and I don't mind that, right? Because age shouldn't be a barrier if you've got the ability, right? And if the scouting is effective, and you've seen something that you think, yeah, we can work with that, we can develop that, we can make that player better to our benefit, then I don't mind that model of recruitment. I think the challenge that signing's going to have is, it's, as you say, it's not going to get the fans off their chairs immediately. It's not a big name signing. Yep. Yeah, there's not a big investment. He's not someone who has that profile that we're looking for to come in and get us through these qualifiers and help us through a European campaign. But he could be one of these, starlets that we uncover. I mean, how many of us had heard of Jota before he arrived on loan?
Or Bernardo, yep.
Yeah, exactly. So these players do exist and they are out there. And as I say, if we were taking an under-21 player from a Serie B side, I'd be like, not sure about this. But we're taking it from Napoli. That's the current Italian champions, right? So you'd like to think that the players that are on their books, even their under-21 players, are of a certain level of quality. So I'm not certainly not opposed to the idea. I wouldn't necessarily want him to come in and be expected to supplant Ida as the number 1 striker. But I think it'd be interesting to see him come in and see what he can do. And a loan to buy, as you say, it's a model that we've had some real success with in the past. So why not?
And as you say, we're now in the position where we need to replace Nicholas Kuhn, whose deal to Como looks as if it's going to go through in the next sort of 24 hours or so, for I think it's about 16.5, 17 million pounds. So it's someone you've got to try and replace 36 goal contributions from last season. 21 goals and 15 assists. That's not just simply a case of, well, let's throw in James Forrest, let's throw in Marco Tilio, let's throw in this person, and we're going to get that. You will have to look at bringing in different options, because if those options were already at the club, you would have seen them. And it's, for me, I think this one, the option to buy clause is something that Celtic have utilised pretty well over the last few years, and bringing in some key players. You think back to Jota, to Bernardo. Adam Ida's a kind of debatable one, just because of how we managed to draw that fee out. I think it's low risk bringing in someone like that, someone who clearly does have a lot of talent, and it's just a case of, can they adapt to Scottish football? If they can, then here's the fee, and we can agree that, and we can look at it next summer. A lot of people are saying, and obviously we've got the tagline of today's show, is Rodgers waiting to be backed before he commits? And I think for me, it's still very early in the window. We're still sitting at the 7th of July, and I agree with people. For example, here, we'll go to the comments. We've not really touched on the comments yet. Flinny coming in saying, agreeing with a comment that Monty made earlier, saying splash the cash. And I can understand that. We are a club that is very cash rich. But in the same situation, we don't want to be spending excessive amounts on players that just aren't up to that standard. Adam Ida, for me, was not a £9 million player. He was a £9 million player in that market.
Yes.
And at this point, we seem to be avoiding going down to that market in the sort of English Championship to sign these players. So what would Adam Ida's value have been had he played for Napoli, had he played for Rapid Vienna, had he played for Royal Antwerp, the teams that we're now linked with just now?
Absolutely.
I think we've got to be smart with it. Although the money's there to be spent, if there is a player that is of that calibre, like Arne Engels was last year, we will spend that money. But we're also not going to be held over a barrel for players that aren't worth what the club's looking for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the key thing about the Adam Ida signings, I've said before, is that it wasn't so much that you were paying what we felt the player was valued at. The important element for me was the fact that the manager wanted a player, and the club said, okay, we're prepared to pay, that level of asking price for a player in order to back the manager. And you want that synergy between the club and the manager as much as possible. Ultimately, the manager is the one who will, fall on his sword if he brings players in and it doesn't work, and we ultimately, we lose our dominance in the in the league. The manager is the one who takes the fall. So I think it is important that a club does back the manager, but I think it's also important that we recognise the fact that managers will get it wrong from time to time. I'm not saying that about Ida, by the way. I think I think Ida still, again, like we were talking about with Trusty earlier, still a player who I think's got a bit to prove to a lot of the Celtic support. I think there's a lot of capability there. I just think with a pre-season under his belt, we'll get a more representative view of Ida this season, and what he's capable of and what he can bring, and maybe actually he'll change a few people's minds. I felt as though he was kind of always in a bit of an uphill struggle last season for a combination of circumstances. But ultimately, look, at Celtic, you've got to either sink or you swim. So I'm keen to see what Ida can do this season. But I think you're right in terms of the signings. We shouldn't be held to ransom financially. As a club, we're in a position where we shouldn't be held to ransom for signings. I think our signings do need to be thoroughly scouted and researched out, so that we do have an informed signing decision for the manager. It's not, we shouldn't be taking too many gambles. The signings where they should be relatively low risk, or as low risk as they can be. And when you look at this boy, you're thinking, loan to buy. You bring him in on loan. If it doesn't work, all you pay is a loan fee, and you try again, with another player next season. So I think the loan to buy model is a really good model. Obviously, it can go against you, because if you want the player, but you've set a loan value, you think, well, he's good, he's got capability, but maybe not quite at that value. You have to go back to the negotiating table, and you don't want to pay over the odds for a player who maybe isn't contributing the way you want him to. But I do think it's a model that a club like us should be taking more advantage of. And when we always talk about the stigma of project players, well, do that for the project players. If you want a project player, loan it by is the way to do it.
Yep. And we speak about, obviously, earlier on. Oh, that's too early for that one. We'll come back to that in a minute.
My eyes.
We'll come back to that in a minute. The idea of being back this window, it's a case of, is it in money terms or is it in player terms? Because we do need to add quality to the squad. That's evident. As I said, when you take a look at the squad that finished the Scottish Cup final, that was clearly not good enough.
No,
it just simply was not good enough. So are these players better than what we've got? There's only one way of kind of finding that one out, and it is to bring them in. And if it is someone who maybe next year would be a £7-8 million player and you're taking that risk on them, the loan with the option to buy, for me, I think it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And look, I think, I've got maybe a slightly older-fashioned view of a manager's role when it comes to recruitment. I think a manager should always have the highest level of control over recruitment. Not complete control, but he's the ultimate stakeholder when it comes to the recruitment process, right? As I say, because he's got the most at stake. If players are brought in and he can't get a tune out of them, then he's the one that ultimately loses his job, right? So for me, I think managers should always have the high degree of control over the final decision. A recruitment team, for me, is there they're there to support the manager in that process. They provide data, they provide analytics, they provide a template, or they work with the manager to produce a template to say, this is the type of player I want to play in the system that I want to put on the park, for the season. And so what you want to see is the manager basically saying, these are the guys that I've brought in. I chose these guys, and I think there was a little bit of alarm at Brendan's comments after the Queen's Park game about Anamura, for example. Now, Anamura, we were all speculating about ahead of that game. We were saying, well, we're struggling to see, well, how does this player fit in? Doesn't have those physical attributes that we spoke about. Apparently, doesn't bring a wealth of experience. Doesn't really fit the profile of someone you think is going to come in and play alongside Carter Vickers or maybe back up KT on the left hand side. And then obviously the manager comes out and says, oh yeah, he's nowhere near ready for the first team. We might even put him on loan. But the whole way that signing was being framed by the club was, this is our new centre back, and it was almost a little bit of fanfare around him coming in. And so for the manager to do that, you're kind of like,
yeah. It kind of reminds you of when we signed Marian Shved, when the first time round, and there was the kind of hype around him coming in, and Rodgers was like, yeah, we'll take a look at him and we'll see if he's good enough to play. And it's like, well, if you're almost coming out and showing discontent to the fact that we've signed this player. Now, the Anamura one, for me, as bizarre as it is, Celtic will make profit on that signing. They've spent £250,000. If he goes and does well on loan somewhere, we might get £1 million for that. And that is part of the production cycle. And that's what we really should be doing with our young players. But instead, we're having to go out to these markets, picking up players quite cheap, bringing them in, turning them around and making a profit on them. And if that's part of the club's business model, that's fine. But as you say, don't put it up there as if it's like he's took Nakamura's number, he's going to come in and make a big impact. And
it was bizarre. It was a little bit bizarre. And I think the problem is it feeds into that perception that the club and the manager are not in sync, right? And I think that's for me is a little bit of a red flag. Now it could mean absolutely nothing, right? And you're sitting here speculating. We've no idea of the inner workings of the relationships. But as I say, the one thing that you never want to see when it comes to these sort of public statements, whether it's a post-match interview, whether it's a statement of the club, is you don't want to see conflicting or contrasting viewpoints. You want the manager and the club to be in sync. And as you say, you referenced the Shved, and a lot of people saw that along with the kind of failure to get John McGinn as the straw that broke the camel's back, really, when it came to Rodgers' previous stint. So you don't want to see similarities or parallels to that again. Otherwise, that I think could indicate that the manager will see out his time and off he goes and it's start again. And listen, we've got to be respectful to Anamura. It's not his fault. He's coming in. He's delighted to be here. Good for him. Sincerely wish the boy all the best of luck. But from a supporter standpoint, Anamura ain't going to cut it for this recruitment window. You know,
No.
we want players who we think can come in, and this goes to your earlier point, that can come in and make us stronger than when we finished the season last year. Now, currently, we've done good business. We've brought in Kieran Tierney. Fantastic. Really positive about that. No issues there. Nygren absolutely fits the profile for me. Internationalist, you know, brings certainly characteristics and strengths that we need, and that level of creativity. And we were crying out for that. So great. At that point, when those two players come in, I think we're stronger than we were last season. Now, we've lost Nawrocki. Didn't make a big contribution last year, but it's a capable body out the door. Lagerbiel's going to follow him. No big loss. More of a number. Again, wish both players the best of luck. But Nicholas Kuhn going out and Greg Taylor going out. Those were
first team contributors in that.
Two established first team players who have played a big part in their season, our success over the past couple of seasons. So now you're thinking, okay, well, we're kind of back to where we were at the end of last season now in terms of bodies, but we've also got, you know, we've got positions there that badly need filled. You know, we've got our first choice winger, which is Jota, by a long way for me, but he's at least, you know, half a season away from coming back, and then you're thinking about how long will it take him to get back up to speed. So we've got a huge hole in that you know, a creative hole in that wing. Maeda. Is Maeda the striker or is he the winger? We don't know at this point. We don't know how Rodgers views him. Rodgers, for me, has always given the impression that he believes Maeda can play as a striker, but he's a winger. Whereas a lot of us see Maeda as a striker, you know, and think Maeda should be a striker. So there are areas of the park, and Kyogo went out as well. Was never, you know, we never replaced him. Again, great respect to Johnny Kenny, but I don't think he's going to fill that hole. So. Yeah, there's work that needs to be done in this transfer window, and from a supporter standpoint, as delighted as I am with the early business that's been done, and I do want to give the club credit for that. We've not added quality, in my opinion. We've brought in quality, but we've not added quality to what we had.
And I think that's where we need to look at I mean, we are on the 7th of July. The qualifier for the Champions League isn't until the middle of August. So there is still time to bed these people in. As someone said earlier in the comments, and I was just looking for it there, but I couldn't find it, you really want them in before the Portugal trip. Before we go to Portugal and do the sort of pre-season tour out there, you really want those players in. But joining us today on Acsom is almost 1,300 strong of you, so please continue to give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. There'll be some fantastic content coming out. We've got Celtic fans, Chris, from all over. As the Urban Culture says, from Plymouth to Puerto Rico, Acsom is everywhere. It is everywhere, and there's lots of great events coming up very soon, so keep an eye out for those. This comment here from River C. Can't decide if I want us to give Jude Bonner and Murray the chance in the first team, take Yang in the Rocky spots, or if I want them out on loan so they get to play more. That's an interesting one, because these guys will end up dropping back down to the Lowland League with the B team. And as we've seen, obviously, the standard isn't great down there, but it is first-team opportunity. What I think was quite interesting about that game on Friday night, Chris, is Celtic are looking to strike up the strategic partnership with Queen's Park, where we can loan up to 5 players out to them this season. You just wonder if it's going to be guys like Jude Bonner and Murray that get that opportunity, because there is the chance that if Celtic require them, whether it be in the middle of the season, out with the transfer window, we can recall them and they can play at any point. So that flexibility is something I'm sure Celtic will look into this season. And to be fair, Queen's Park, it's not as if they've got far to travel.
No, exactly. And look, it makes sense. I want these players playing competitive football. The B-League, I agree with you, it doesn't cut it. And I think there was evidence of that. This is going to sound harsh, but I would ask folks to stick with me on it. When you consider the age range of a number of those players that played against Queen's Park the other night, and then you compare them to the career trajectory of, say, an Arnie Engels, who's about the same age, right? The contrast is quite alarming. And I look throughout that team that played, and listen, this is the top club in the country. This is where the standards have got to be the highest. So the challenge is obviously the highest as well. So it's not easy for these players to come in and make the step up, and I'm sure they're putting a ton of hard work in. But I looked throughout that team, and there were no obvious candidates for me that stood out to say they're ready to jump into the first team at the moment. Right now, I'd be delighted to see Dane Murray get some first team exposure, but is Dane Murray jumping in as a starting centre back for me at this point in time? No, he's not. Right, he's not. The one exception is maybe Ross Doohan. Looked pretty comfortable, pretty capable, and we know he can play at this level, so no issues there. But if we're really focusing on the youth team, the guys who are playing the B team week in, week out, they're not ready for the step up to first team on that evidence, right? And that's my opinion based on what I saw, and it sounds really, really harsh. And when, as I say, you've got the Arne Engels comparison, I'm just using Arne Engels as an example. There's lots of other examples we could use. Young 21 and 22 is no longer a kid in football terms. At 21 and 22, in your top teams, you've got players, playing in the top tournaments, playing week in, week out with the top team, and turning into your Phil Fodens or whoever. So I think we need to do more to get these lads exposure to competitive, higher level football and give them the best possible platform and opportunity to bridge that gap between what is currently our development team and our first team. Because for me, the gap is huge. It's far from.
I don't think anybody can disagree with that. Another thing that Rodgers was sort of been hinting at is that we're still looking for productivity at the top end of the park. And Stephen McGowan's article on Friday night was mentioning that the top targets for Celtic this summer are a centre-back, 2 wingers, a midfielder and a striker. And someone that we've been linked with over the summer, over the last 24 hours, and apparently had a bid rejected for in the last few hours, is Isaac Janssen, the 23-year-old winger, who actually replaced Nicholas Kuhn at Rapid Vienna, coming from the Spanish second division for €250,000 just over 18 months ago. 7 goals and 2 assists in 22 league games for him last season, with 2 goals and an assist in 6 Europa League games. As I was mentioning earlier, it's more of a fluid front three I'm seeing this season. This is someone that can play on both left and the right wing. He can also play in the false 9. From the clips that you see of him, he's someone who plays predominantly on the right and cuts inside to kind of shoot. Again, it almost sounds like a sort of carbon copy of Nicholas Kuhn.
Yeah.
The valuation from Anthony Joseph's tweet earlier was that Rapid Vienna are looking for somewhere close to £10 million for the winger. The Scottish papers over the weekend were saying it was about £3 million. Just reading there that on Sky Austria, they believe that they're looking for a record transfer fee for the signing of Isaac Janssen. Their record transfer fee is around £7.5 million. So it does look as though we're kind of somewhere in the middle in that. We have had a £3.5 million bid rejected, and there is a French team who has bid £4 million just now, and both bids have been rejected. So this is one that seems as if it's got legs, Chris. And I mean, it's good to see that we're being proactive. As much as Kuhn is out the door, he's not out yet, but we're already looking at trying to bring his replacement in.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, like you've said, I agree with the proactivity. I think, I've got to be honest, I respect, the selling club for placing the value on their player. It'd be similar to us. We don't want to see low ball offers for our players. But at the same time, we've also got, as you said earlier, we can't be held over a barrel for
Yep.
despite the fact we are in a good, strong financial position. This player, looking into him, it looks decent, but again, maybe not quite the profile of player that the supporters are looking for. £10 million, I think we would be keen to see us spend that on a player, but the player's got to be worth it, right? The player's got to be worth it. As I say, you want to check a lot of boxes for £10 million for us. Now, I like the idea of the flexibility of the player, play on both wings. We seem to like that type of player.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the players we bring in have got that adaptability, which is great. Give us the opportunity to, it's not just a like for like replacement. Then you can adapt, to injuries and other circumstances that players are out, which is good. So if they can cover a range of positions across that front line, fantastic. Believe he's got good pace. Again, something that we tend to make good use of, which is great. I have heard some concerns about his fitness record. He's quite injury prone, and he's prone to getting a few knocks. I haven't validated that, so I need to go and do a bit more research, but some of the views on the socials from people who knows that he is quite a bit injury prone. So that could be a concern, particularly our history of wingers getting injured at the moment. So, but look, at the end of the day, if it's a player we want, you never go in with your first, your final offer straight away, right? So you always go in lower than what you're actually intending to pay. So we're going at 3.5 million, whatever it is. They want 10 million. You are looking to try and find some sort of middle ground there. If the record transfer is 7 million, and Brendan wants him, and he ticks a few boxes, 7 million, yeah.
That's the thing. You obviously, as you say, it is a business. You go in to negotiate. You don't go in. It's like if you're buying something that they want a tenner, no, 750. You meet in the middle somewhere. Unfortunately, the Celtic board seem to have the sort of Tam Mullen syndrome, where they go in and someone asks for 10 million and they go, "I'll give you one." Yes. And then it takes their time to get eventually up to that point where they find the sort of common ground to make the sort of deal done. But yeah, if there's other teams sniffing around, then Celtic will have to be very astute not to miss out if this is who Rodgers is really wanting to bring in. What you mentioned there about the sort of the injury record, and I think you see that a lot from very explosive players. I think if you bring in someone who is quick and someone, especially if they're coming to play in Scotland, where we do have hatchet men that play for other teams. They are out there. We saw it earlier on in the season, Hatate taken out by a horrible tackle from Pape Gueye. There is so many like that. So that is something you do have to be aware of. But if you have two quality left-hand side wingers and two quality right-hand side wingers at the club competing, and that means that if they go off injured, then the player that's coming on is as good as them. That's what you're looking for. There should be two quality players in almost every position. So if it means that you're bringing in guys like Janssen and he's competing against Jota, and you bring in someone like Balakishwa or Nigrin and he's competing against someone else, that's, for me, more favourable than, as it stands just now, Jota drops out, Yang comes in, and for me, as good as Yang can be on his day, he's never going to quite get to that level.
No, I would agree. You want... I think there's a set level of quality that the manager has set his sights on within the club, and for me, there's almost a level that if you're not above that level, and you can't show that you can get above that level pretty quickly, I don't really think you're going to make it. And I'm starting to think, again, it sounds terrible because you've got him as a human being there, but when I look at Yang, I just think we've seen it. He is moving the right trajectory, but he's not going to get there quickly enough for us. And I think that's the problem. We don't, as a club, because of the expectations we have as Celtic fans, we don't have the time to develop players at too slow a rate. We need players who are going to come in, and even if they're development players, they have to develop at a rate that contributes to us, because we've constantly got something at stake, right? We've constantly got something at stake. We've got a qualifier coming up that could define our season. And it could define future seasons, because if we miss out in Champions League revenue, knowing our club the way we do, and there's a precedent here, they'll tighten his purse strings, right? Yep. We won't be able to bring in the players to continue to increase that quality. So I think it's important at this club that we set a benchmark to say the Jota level of quality, for example, as a winger. We need players of equal or better quality. The Maeda striker category, we need players of equal or better quality than that are going to come in and are going to compete. And the manager's going to look at his bench and say, well, if I take him off, I know I can put him on, and actually the quality is not going to drop. And that was the problem at the cup final, I felt, is that we replaced, either forcibly or throughout the way the game played out, we brought players off, and the level of player that we subsequently brought on was not good enough. And that was why we didn't win that match.
Yeah. I just want to highlight, we are seeing the jokes in the comment section. I'm enjoying them.
I'm trying to keep a straight face.
Definitely keep them coming. What I'll do is I'll go through all of them after the live show. I'll pick out the favourite and I'll put it in the comment section below. So definitely keep them coming. Finally, just touching someone I feel like we've been talking about now for a long, long time. Mikael-Ange Balakishwa, the 24-year-old from Antwerp. Only 16 league games last season, 4 goals and 3 assists. With muscle injuries since January 2024, he's missed 39 games, which is a lot. Antwerp want to make quick progress on this, and they've reduced their asking fee again down to £4.3 million. It almost sounds as if it's damaged goods they're trying to get rid of, Chris.
Do you know, it always puts me in mind of another player that was considered damaged goods when we signed him, and that was Big John Hartson, and we know how he turned out for us. So I would never put too much stock in someone's injury record. I've viewed Kieran Tierney the same way, right? I know there's a lot of concerns about his injury record, which I think is overplayed in my opinion. Look, this player, I think, fitness concerns aside, I think looks like a decent signing. I think he would tick quite a lot of the boxes we would expect from that level of quality signing that we want. Yes, the injury concern is valid. Some injuries can stick with players for their whole career, and they have to change their game and adapt their game because of injuries. But I think we have to again show a degree of trust in the process. This is a player, as you say, we've been linked with for a long time. That tells me that there must be something in the interest in this player, right? I think maybe the concern is the fact that his current club are so keen to get him out the door. What does that tell you? Is that potentially a red flag, or is it just the fact that they don't have a place for him in the squad and they want to get their profit?
It sounds as though they do have to try and sell before they buy, so I can understand that.
There's a dependency there.
Yeah.
So he's a player that I think, as I say, from what I've seen of him, I think he would come in, he would fit quite well into our system. I think he would play the type of football that we supporters quite like. And listen, players go through medicals for a reason. If our medical team find an issue that they think, will put his career with us in jeopardy, then the signing won't go through. So I'm prepared to trust the process on this one, because I think if the injury concerns are not something that's going to cause us a problem, then I think he'll bring a lot of positives to the club. So yeah, looks like a good signing for me.
We were just saying on Friday as well that it's sort of been quiet for the incomings, and now this just explodes over the last 48 hours or so. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see however many more names are linked. I just want to touch briefly on the one that surprised me, not Celtic as such, but a former Celt, Mikey Johnson, potentially making the move to, I think, Flamengo in Brazil. Although I did read this morning that the fans have revolted against the signing, and therefore it doesn't seem to be going through. I mean, poor Mikey, a chance to go and live down in Brazil and show the Hoga Bonito flair, but it just doesn't sound as if he's going to get that deal going through, despite Robbie Keane being on Brazilian radio this morning defending him. It wasn't enough.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, to be honest. And maybe it's just the way modern football is going, with everything's out in the open in terms of this stuff. But it's almost like a soap opera drama that we're watching. The players on the verge of a great move, and then the fans revolt, and then suddenly you've got alumni going to phoning up and defending him, and it's crazy. I mean, Mikey Johnson, I think, will go down in Celtic infamy. Not really for what he's done on the park for us, but just throughout his career, he's going to turn into one of these kind of Ollie Burke characters that we still talk about years after he was with us, just because his career takes this sort of weird trajectory. But look, again, you got to appreciate there's a human being there. So can only wish Mikey the best of luck. Hopefully, if he doesn't get this move, hopefully he gets a dream move further down the line, and continues to have a good career. So good luck to him. But yeah, this was a bizarre one.
Kevin Graham coming in saying it was Flamingo Land in Scarborough that wanted him. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that someone's mixed up their signings. Now, we gave everybody that's watching on YouTube a bit of a jump scare earlier. Keith Woden coming in saying, was that the mermaid or the jellyfish top? We need to touch on this, Chris. I'm going to bring it back up. So if there's young children in the room, or if you're very squeamish, then you can look away now. But here is the new training top that was released earlier today.
God.
So, just reading through what Celtic have said, it is the pre-match jersey for this season, so we will see it quite a lot. It'll be what they wear in the warm-ups. It's festival-inspired, and the top is perfect for sporting at your favourite gigs this summer. It was advertised and sort of worn in the advert by LF System, who are a house duo from West Lothian, and also by the artist formerly known as Harv. I think she goes by Vinnie now, who's another Glasgow DJ. I think, Chris, we spoke about this when we were doing the third top. Celtic are now targeting a market that is beyond your everyday match-going fan. This is something that they're wanting influencers to pick up. It's something that they're wanting the casual fan that maybe hasn't bought a top in a long time, or a younger fan. This isn't for a 25 season like holder that's been going 30 years. They remember the 90s. They do this. This isn't for them. This is clearly targeting a sort of younger demographic.
Are you telling me you can't picture Jim Orr wearing this to the game then? Is that
no, Jim's definitely got it on pre-order.
It's fine. We're going to get pelters for that one. But look, I don't have an issue with the club, the club trying to market to different demographics. I actually think that's a good strategy. Where I have a real issue with this, and anyone who follows me on social media has had a bit of a dig at the club over this, because football, in terms of its roots and where it's evolved from, was always very much a working class sport. It was always a working man sport, I should say. And, Ian Conroy, one of our contributors, posted something up earlier which was quite poignant, and it was a flyer basically to advertise in the Celtic game. And it was like, your season ticket was 20 quid. I think it was from 1975, and OEPs and kids get into the game for 40 pence, and we're so far removed from that environment now. And I think it's a real shame. Now, my biggest issue with this top, apart from the fact I don't particularly like it, right? That's a personal issue. I know a lot of people actually do quite like it. But my issue with it is it's £60, right? It's £60 for a top. We've had the third kit released, it was £70. Now, I said in the show the other day, I was fortunate enough the other week there, I was at Celtic Park with my little boy. We were at Hoopie's fun day, all the kids running about, in Celtic Park, having a great time. Now, what I saw there, though, was a lot of parents with sometimes 2, maybe 3 kids, and they're all wearing replica kits, right? Yep. Now, on the assumption that they're all kits that they bought for the Celtic store, that's going into hundreds upon hundreds of pounds. What about all the families who can't afford that? What about all the kids who see this and think, oh, I really want that? And the pressure that puts under parents. Now, our club, look, it's a business. I get it. There's a marketing strategy. I get that as well. I think expanding our reach into different demographics is a good thing. But can we do it without fleecing the lifeblood of the club, which is the supporters? And that's my concern with it. I'll defend, Celtic to the end of my days, but the fans are the lifeblood of the club, as far as I'm concerned. It should always be the priority. And £60 for a top that, in all honesty, it looks like my 7-year-old, soon to be 7-year-old son could draw. I've got to say, come on, guys, do better.
So it's actually causing a bit of a divide in the comment section. I'm just going to go through some of the comments. Maestro95, I'm taking a fit. That top's winking at me. I am DQ. We Celtic dads are not the target market. Adidas know what they're doing. As long as the club makes money, it's all good. Mikey coming in saying shades required. I can see that. It's very reflective. Celtic 88 also comes in saying doubles up as a glow stick vest for festivals. But not everyone is against it. The Slabbering Cabbage comes in to say, I honestly think it's a cool top. Strange Love the Doctor comes in saying it's an instant classic shirt, bright and cheerful. I think it's a cracker. River C coming in saying genuinely switching windows till you get this off. It's hurting my head. And Ona Permo comes in saying it's nicer than the third kit. Now I can see the sort of green colour that they've come in with on the third kit. But this one has to be the one that will decide how good or bad it is. The Urban Culture coming in saying, I'll buy it if John Hughes wears it. So, John, the challenge
probably will.
Next time you're on Acsom, we need to see you with it on.
I know Lloyd's probably bought it already.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. But yeah, £60. I think that's kind of where we're at for the training gear that's just came out is about that price as well. It's Adidas pricing more than anything else, and I think that's what we'll see as the contract continues. Want to give a big thanks to Barry James with the 1999 Super Chat. Happy with the signings so far, but we need more experience in midfield and more physicality in the midfield. I think we should make a move for Bayindir, the goalkeeper from Manchester United. For me, Chris, I think I saw him obviously last season, and again, thanks to Barry James with the super chat that as Himmer comes in to say that's a third of the shirt, so we're one step closer to getting John Hughes in that shirt. By India, he has looked quite impressive from the performances that I've seen him play for Manchester United, especially in the FA Cup last season. I think he was the hero in the penalty shootout. I think the goalkeeper position is probably one we've got covered just now with Kasper Schmeichel in goal. Sinisalo looked good when he came in. And now, as you say, we've sort of brought in a pair of safe hands in Ross Doohan. Is he going to replace any of them? I don't really know about that. In terms of midfield, though, I can't disagree. I do think we need that sort of digging midfielder that can help us out, especially in Europe. Everyone sort of harks back to a Victor Wanyama type signing. You don't really get those players anymore, but someone that can give us a bit of grit in the midfield is certainly would be a good signing ahead of this season.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, on the goalkeeping point, I think it's a good player to be linked with, but I actually think goalkeeping is an area where we don't really have too many concerns at the moment. I mean, assuming that Kasper Schmeichel is going to play for another season, I thought Sinisalo was a great deputy when he came in, and there would have no issues with him stepping up. And actually, Ross Doohan, I think it's a good signing. I actually think he's got more potential of playing than, say, Scott Bain did when he was here, because he's got that SPL experience, recent, and he's a solid shot stopper. So I don't think the goalkeeping area is any area of concern for us this coming into this season. Obviously, again, we're going to need maybe a longer term solution, but that challenge currently for me is on Sinisalo to show that he can step up and take over when Schmeichel does eventually decide to hang up the gloves. So the midfield element, that's I agree with you. That is one of our big concerns. Callum McGregor, I think, does a capable job at trying to play that defensive holding midfield role. I don't think it's his best position. I think he's much better when he's helping transition the play from back to front and going forward. And we saw his goal scoring contributions. I think that's Callum McGregor's strength. I thought Engels might have been the answer in that sort of destroyer position, but I think he's more of a sort of deep line playmaker. I like his distribution from deep is good, but I don't think he necessarily breaks the play up as well and uses his physicality as well as he might do. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I think a Victor Wanyama type player in there, somebody again that can show that physical side, and kind of boss, opposition players off the ball. That's what I think we're crying out for. And particularly in games in Europe where we're not necessarily always in the front foot, you need someone in there that can help manage the game. And I always like the idea of a deep lying holding midfield player, somebody, a Neil Lennon type, because they see a lot of the game in front of them and they can read the game, and I think it gives the defenders comfort as well, having that type of player there. So yeah, I agree. I can't think off the top of my head outside of N'Golo Kante, who, and actually for his size, he was remarkably physical, but I can't think of a modern day player who really does that consistently. I think I quite liked Calvin Phillips when he was at Leeds. I thought he would have been a potential type player, and he's again a guy whose career's kind of stagnated a little bit. I thought he was a player we might have looked at, and I think there was tentative links at one point, but nothing really came of it. But yeah, I think if we were to make a signing in that vein, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see any more links with midfielders. As I said earlier, the article from Stephen McGowan earlier in the week was saying that we are looking at bringing a midfielder in. We haven't really had anyone linked so far yet. We are showcasing, and again, a big thanks to Barry with the super chat there. We are showcasing what has been released today, which is the Celtic training kit for this season, the pre-match jersey. If anyone wants me to remove it from the screen, they just have to match the same super chat.
I'm going to get a wallet and do that.
I'll remove it from the screen. Just this will link into just our final point before we wrap up for today. There was the video that came out this weekend from Lennoxtown, just showing the training on Friday, and we could see in the video Kieran Tierney, Dyson Maeda, Yang, Hatate, Benjamin Negrin, Inamura, James Forrest, all back in there alongside Marco Tio as well. So these players look as if they will be back in, if not for the game on Tuesday against Cork, then certainly for the upcoming friendlies in Portugal. Brendan Rodgers also confirmed that the operation for Cameron Carter-Vickers went down very well and he should be back in the next few weeks, and that Rio Hatate and James Forrest are back for the game in Cork. Chris, it's starting to trend. We're starting to see the sort of senior players coming back into the squad now. I think the game on Tuesday night, we should see more of them being involved for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. There's a couple I'm keen to see as well. I think Marco Tilio, you mentioned there as well. I know a lot of people feel like the ship has sailed with Tilio. I don't feel as though we ever saw enough of him to make that determination. So I'm prepared to have another look at this player before I write him off entirely, because I do think he came with the right sort of fanfare about his ability. So if the player's prepared to knuckle down and really make an effort to make his career here, then let's see what he can do in the friendlies. Let's see maybe if he's someone that can make the step up and maybe solve one of those problems on the wings. So yeah, keen to see what he can do. Glad to see Rio Hatate's coming back, because I think his creativity is something that we heavily depend on. And it'll be interesting to see how he eventually plays alongside or links up with Nygren. Those players could potentially complement each other. One concern I've got about our squad at the moment is in that central midfield area, we are quite saturated at the moment. We've got quite a few players there, so it'll be interesting to see how the manager manages that situation. We've obviously got McCowan, you've got Bernardo, you've got Engels, you've got Kalmak, who is probably a shoe-in to play, Nygren and Hatate. Can they all coexist throughout the season? Are we going to make use out of all of them throughout the season? Does that mean there's no pathway up for young McArdle, for example? It'll be interesting to see how that develops. I think they're all decent players in their own right, but if we continue playing this system, there is only going to be a place for three of them as the preferred starting lineup. So whether the manager can keep everybody happy or not will be one of the questions as we go through the season.
And that'll be one that we will follow very closely as Acsom continues to follow Celtic home and away this season. A big thank you to the over 1,400 strong that joined us for today's Monday episode. I will go through all the comments and try and find the best joke and put it in the comments section underneath. If you've got any more jokes afterwards, leave it in the comment section. It really helps the YouTube algorithm and helps fellow Celtic fans find the Acsom podcast. I'll just finish with this one, John. I suppose it's better than looking at you two. Well, if we look worse than that kit, then I think we've got a lot of work to be doing. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30 for the Acsom Bulletin, keeping up to date with any transfers in and out of the club in the next 24 hours. We're also covering the game against Cork City tomorrow night. Remember, it is a 6 o'clock kickoff. It's an earlier kickoff. Acsom will be live at 5:30. The game is on Celtic TV and it's on Premier Sports 1 as well. Thanks, Chris, for joining us today on A Celtic State of Mind. And to everyone who joined in, thank you very much as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Take care. Hail, hail.
Thanks, Colin.